Yo, this is Bench Gamer here. So, patch 3.2 for Genshin Impact has been out for a while now, and I think it's okay at this point to talk about some of the statistics that have come out for it. I wanted to wait a couple of days before I talked about this stuff because Google Trends statistics tend to need to, they need a couple of days to settle down before they can have a more, I wouldn't say accurate number, but a more concrete number. Because if you look at the right-hand side, this number 65 here representing the peak of interest for patch 3.2 for Nahida's banner. This 65 here, it'll change depending on when you log in. Sometimes, like yesterday when I look at this page, it said 69 and then it said 61 at some point in like the past couple of hours, and now it's at 65, 64, 66. I've gotten those numbers as well. So it seems to be averaging around 64 to 66. The peak was 69 and then the low was 61. So I assume that once patch 3.2 is done, this number will settle in at the average of 64 to 66 once all the info that Google Trends is working with becomes a bit more concrete and just a bit more finite than what it is like dealing with right now. So yeah, that's where Google Trends is at for patch 3.2. I also wanted to wait a couple of days before talking about Nahida's banner sales, because if you've been following the Genshin community stuff, you probably already know that Nahida's banner broke sales records for Genshin Impact. It broke the all-time, this day one sales records for all the banners. And it seems like it's going to be the most profitable banner of all time, given the span that it's running in. Like, obviously, Ayaka's banner is still going to earn more because it ran for like 9 weeks. And Raiden Shogun might even earn more overall because it's probably going to run a day or two longer than Nahida's banner. If you didn't know, patch 3.0 to patch 3.2 have gotten their duration shortened by 1 week. So if it's split evenly, then Nahida's banner is only going to run for like less than 2 weeks. It's going to be 2 weeks and maybe like a day or two. So yeah, it's not going to run as long as Raiden Shogun. So you shouldn't be surprised if by the end of its banner, it still doesn't top Raiden Shogun's in terms of overall revenue. But on a day-to-day basis, it definitely is earning more than Raiden Shogun. There's also been some, like, people have said that Yoimiya is part of the reason why it's earning more, but I will talk about that later on. But I don't think that's that's kind of just copium. Okay, so backtracking a bit, if you've been following this channel, if you're a subscriber, you might have been wondering why I haven't covered patch 3.2 content up to now. And if you haven't been reading my community posts, that's probably more of a mystery to you. But it's honestly not like a big deal. I haven't really stopped playing Genshin Impact. It's just that I have nothing to complain about, so I feel like there's nothing to make content for. I don't really think I have anything too controversial to say that like 100 different other people haven't already said before me. So the gist of it is that Sumeru's Archon quest is pretty damn good. I think this is one of the only times I teared up while playing Genshin Impact. That was at the end of the Sumeru Archon quest in Act 5 when Nahida and, Rukudavada had their own, their hug fest. Anyways, that was really damn good. I think the vast majority of Genshin's community would probably agree that Sumeru's Archon quest is higher in quality and just better paced overall compared to Inazuma's. And it's just, like, overall the best piece of story content we've ever gotten for Genshin. There might be, like, 2 or 3 forever Inazuma stands who disagree with that, but they're definitely in the minority. So, in my last video talking about Genshin Impact's popularity, like its continued popularity, right? It's pretty obvious if you just look at Google Trends. It's even more popular now on average compared to the first year of its release, right? I already talked about this in my last video, but I did mention as well that there were some things that Mihoyo did in Sumeru that was different from Inazuma. And I was not that big of a fan of some of the things they did, especially in terms of how they paced the banner characters, and I thought that it would actually decrease the overall interest in Genshin Impact. Because what they did was they only released 1 new 5-star character in the first patch, whereas in Inazuma they released 2 new 5-star characters. And my opinion at the time when they first announced this was that this would be a bad idea. I wanted them to go like all out on the first patch and give us so much content that we would literally have no way to finish it, and to give us all of the characters right at the very start. And that was my idea of a good way to keep people's interest. But what they actually did was they not only they extended the amount of interest that we are investing into Genshin Impact by not only like spreading out the characters over a longer period of time, but also lengthening the Archon quest, right? Inazuma's Archon quest only had 3 acts, while Sumeru's had 5 acts. And I think this is the primary reason why people liked Sumeru's quests more overall. Like there is also an argument to be made that the quality of the content itself, patch by patch, is higher than Inazuma's, but I'm not sure if that is actually the case, right? This is something I've been wondering about ever since I finished the last act, which is that was I actually having more fun on a patch to patch basis for Sumeru than Inazuma? Because when Inazuma first launched, I had a lot of fun with the first patch, with 2.0, and I honestly don't think that Sumeru 3.0, in terms of its quest content, was all that much better than Inazuma 2.0. It's just that in the second patch, in 2.1, they kind of dropped the ball because the story didn't really finish all that well, and the third act was not enough time for us to actually, get to know the characters and for the characters to really show themselves as something we should care about. And I think they did much better in Sumeru just because there was more time for them to actually write the characters and for the characters to do stuff. And in the epilogue, of course, all of the main characters, even the NPCs like Junior Zod, showed up. Whereas in Inazuma, not even Sarakujo, who was one of the playable characters, she wasn't even in the epilogue. So that was kind of weird. And Inazuma's Archon quest really ended with Raiden Shogun's second story quest, and that only came out, I think, in 2.3 or 2.4. I'm not sure now. I can't remember, but it just felt like they were trying to tell too much story within too little time. And Sumeru's Archon quest definitely did not have that problem. But barring the positive effects of having 5 acts instead of 3 that Inazuma, Mondstadt, Liu, all of the previous regions got, it also had the effect of changing the structure of how characters are spread out. And this is kind of important because the way that the characters are released are really an indicator of how much money Genshin is making from Mihoyo, because it's really the characters that are making money for Mihoyo. It's the characters that are everything in Genshin. That's what people get excited about from patch to patch. Unless there's new region content, then the only things that we're getting are really just the characters. So that was why I was concerned that only releasing one new 5-star character was a bad thing for Sumeru going right out of the gate. And I thought that if they only released one new 5-star character, people would lose interest in Genshin fast enough that it would negatively impact Genshin's revenue. But by the time that 3.1 rolled around and I started playing 3.1 and I checked in on Google Trends, it didn't really show that people were dropping interest in Genshin. It seems like the peak of interest in Genshin for each of the individual patches that covered the Archon quest was not really dipping. If you look at Inazuma, what happened was that after the Archon quest, we had an immediate double rerun banner, right? Not a double banner. I don't think double banners existed at that point, but we just got an entire patch of filler content and just rerun banners, and that's why it dropped all the way from 70 here to from the release of Raiden Shogun to 55 in 2.2. Now that didn't happen in Sumeru, because in Sumeru we got only one new 5-star character in 3.0, and then we got 2 new 5-star characters in the second patch, and then we got the Archon quest, the Archon character, Nahida, right after that in 3.2. And I think overall this has actually increased the average amount of interest that people have in Genshin in general. If you look at the peaks here, these are 3 continuous, very consistent peaks of interest for Genshin. It's 65, 67, 67, 64. And this isn't even, this 64 right here, it's not even the Archon quest. It's not even Sumeru. This is just the second golden I always have trouble saying that. It's the summer event, right? It's the archipelago event. So all of these are very similar levels of interest as Inazuma. It's not as high as the 70 for Raiden Shogun, but it's high enough that overall the average interest in Genshin has actually increased over Inazuma. And they've done this by not only lengthening the Archon quest, but also by spreading the characters out over more patches. And even now, we still haven't gone to the vast majority, the hype content for Sumeru is still not over. We still have the Wanderer to go for Scaramouche. Next patch, we're getting the Wanderer, who is really just Scaramouche. We're probably going to get a story quest or an interlude Archon quest of some kind that covers how he turns into the Wanderer. So that's pretty hype as well. The Wanderer, of course, got like, I think, what was it? I have to go check Twitter. I'm pretty sure the Wanderer got the most retweets for a Genshin character for Genshin drip marketing. Well, I actually can't find him. He should be here somewhere. Whatever. Anyways, I'm pretty sure he was the most retweeted tweet that Genshin has, the official Genshin account has ever released. So I'm pretty sure that's a thing, but there's just too much fan art and bullshit I have to go through to find it. Anyways, he is a hype character, and it just seems like there's more stuff to look forward to in Sumeru compared to Inazuma after the Raiden Shogun, after the Archon is released. And I'm really glad they did this, not only from a story standpoint, but it's definitely a healthier release schedule for Genshin Impact, and I hope they continue with this in the future. I do have some suspicions on why they released the Raiden Shogun in only patch 2.1. I'm not really sure if they actually intended to have only 3 acts in Inazuma to begin with, because there were rumors at the time that they initially wanted to kill off the Raiden Shogun. I don't know if this is true, these are just rumors, but I can definitely believe that they were going in another direction with the story, and maybe they changed it not only by like not killing off the Raiden Shogun, but releasing her earlier in patch 2.1 rather than 2.2 like they did with Nahida in 3.2, because they were afraid that the people would just lose interest in Genshin Impact, like I was afraid that people will lose interest in Genshin Impact. Not really afraid, but just a fear that this is something that would happen to the game. So they might have wanted to release her earlier. Like, if you look at the first year of Genshin's performance, right, it's actually lower than what it is right now. And they might have been afraid that, you know, there was no guarantee that Genshin would continue to be as popular as it is now. There was no guarantee. They had not had this major peak of interest yet. It's not like they didn't put out content, right? We had the Golden Apple Archipelago, we had Dragon Spine, but none of those generated anywhere near the same amount of interest as like any of the later content in the past year or so. So that is just some of my thoughts on Mihoyo's thought processes and why they might have released Raiden Shogun earlier than they did for Nahida in Sumeru. And it might not because they're just super fucking dumb. Like I don't think they thought that the 3-act Archon quest in Inazuma was something to like write home about. I definitely think they had an idea that it was not like the best Archon quest ever, and they fixed those problems in Sumeru. So did they take in people's like considerations for Inazuma, their criticisms of Inazuma, or did they know that these were problems to begin with? I don't know. Okay, moving on to the sales revenue for Nahida. So one of the things that I was concerned about when I first heard that she broke record sales for first day was that people were like writing home too early about the significance of this. Obviously, Yoimiya is on the banner as well, so that's one of the things that people have said to like balance out the fact that she is making like super bucks. But if you look at some of the statistics for the number of polls for Nahida versus Yoimiya, well, Nahida's polls account for like 95% of the total sales. It says out of the 125,025 drops, Nahida has been responsible for 118,638 of them, which represents around 95% of the total sales. Some fans claim that even though they knew that the Dendro Archon would do much better than Yoimiya, they did not expect such a huge difference. Sorry, burp there. So this did not surprise me at all because Yoimiya has been rerun like 3 times already. This is her 3rd rerun or the 2nd rerun, I believe. So people have had a lot of chances to pull for Yoimiya. Now, I don't think it would be as big of a difference as this, like 95%. I don't really even know where this info comes from. I'm sure it comes from like Genshin Labs or Genshin Wishes, like .mo or something. So it's not like, this number is not like a concrete number, but I do think it probably does accurately represent the disparity between the number of Nahida polls versus Yoimiya polls. Like, let's be honest, Yoimiya wasn't the most cracked banner like character to begin with, so people aren't going to pull her simply for like power levels. And given that she's being like put up against Nahida, it's obvious which character is going to be like higher ranking in terms of tiers and which character is more new. So this 95% versus 5% for Yoimiya is not is not anything that should surprise you. So whenever you look at this bar here for Yoimiya polls, for Nahida and Yoimiya, let's go back here. So you just take 5% off out of this bar, and that's probably where Yoimiya is at. So 3 million, that's like 2.9 instead of 3.0. So after a while, Raiden Shogun does kind of catch up in terms of total sales numbers, but from a day-to-day basis, Yoimiya and Nahida, I don't know why I say Yoimiya anymore. It's just Nahida. Nahida does seem to be pulling her own weight when it comes to day-to-day banner sales. One of the things that I was afraid of was that Nahida would fall off, because day one banner sales do not represent the people who pull for characters just because of the story, right? People have not fully completed the Archon quest yet when they pull for Nahida on day one. At least the vast majority of people who are pulling in the first like couple of hours, they're not doing it because of the story. They're just pulling for her because they either think they're very sure that they want to pull for her because they've already been convinced by the Archon quest, or because they just think she's going to be super strong, or for some other reason, like she's the Archon, so I have to get all the Archons. So there will be a number of people who only pull for Nahida because they want to see the conclusion of the story quest first. And yeah, that was one of the things I was afraid of, that the Archon quest would not like land as well as it did. And obviously it did land very well, and it gave the Sumeru Archon quest the conclusion that it deserved. And for that reason, I think that was probably one of the reasons why Nahida's banner sales continue to increase day to day. And you see Raiden Shogun pulling up against Nahida here, but then on the like 8th day, she actually like the disparity between the two banners actually increased. So I don't think it's inaccurate to say now that Nahida is definitely the most profitable banner of all time. I do think that overall, Raiden Shogun might still earn more, because the patches for 3.0 to 3.2 are actually shorter than previous ones. And of course, you have to take into account that Yoimiya represents like 5% of the sales. So the disparity is probably not as big as it seems here. But given the fact that 3.2 is going to be an entire week shorter than 2.1, yeah, Raiden Shogun is going to have 2 or 3 more days in terms of sales compared to Nahida. So overall, she might still make more, but day-to-day sales, Nahida has definitely won, and she has definitely earned like the record-breaking, whatever it is that the record is. She's the most profitable banner of all time, not just in Genshin, but probably just in gacha games in general. So yeah, there you go. I don't know if there are any other factors into this. Like, this chart only represents Genshin iOS revenue in China. So unless Android users just absolutely hate Nahida, or people outside of China don't like Nahida as much, like maybe the North American market just really don't like chibi characters or lolly characters or whatever you want to call them, then maybe Nahida sales will fall off in other places compared to Raiden Shogun. But we don't really have any info for that, and I honestly think that this disparity in kind of like taste and interest is probably a bit more exaggerated. Like, I feel like North America players like to say that they're not as into mobile games or gacha games or chibi lolly anime shit as other regions, but like I don't actually think that's true. I think that's just one of the narratives that players like to tell themselves, that they're more hardcore or they're more into like manly shit compared to other regions like Japan or China. So I think that's a bunch of bullcrap. I think Nahida is just overall more popular than Raiden Shogun. So anyways, that's the banner sales. What else is there? So obviously, Genshin is still continuing to be very popular. The average popularity of Genshin has increased in the last year compared to the first year. And one of the things that has come up is that I've seen that some Genshin content creators have been talking about Blue Protocol. If you don't know what Blue Protocol is, I think it's like this Japanese anime MMO that has taken, I wouldn't say taken some hints from Genshin Impact in terms of its game design. I think as an MMO, it's probably going to be a very different game compared to Genshin. Like, even some of the things I'm seeing right now, like some of the gameplay, I'm pretty sure I saw some of the gameplay here. There are some more physics-based things. Like, I saw a boss knock off some of the characters that they were playing as. But the problem with Blue Protocol is, one, there is really just not that much to talk about it right now. Like they are only entering a beta test, according to this official Japanese Blue Protocol account. And this is what people have been hyping up in terms of Genshin content creators, and they're saying like that they are hoping that a competitor finally arises for Genshin Impact. After all, I do think it. I do worry that without a good competitor, Genshin Impact is just going to fall off even more than it has for the people who want more hardcore endgame content. And I still do want. I'm still like taking that coping pill that one day we might get some of more of that more hardcore endgame content stuff. If not in Genshin Impact, then in another Mihoyo game. But I don't think they'll even do that if there's no competitor. Like think about it. Why would you make another game that is like doing something all that different from Genshin Impact? Like what is the motivation even for Mihoyo to make other games? Because wouldn't they just be competing with themselves? Like that is one of the things I'm still wondering about. Like what is the actual motivation for making other games compared to Genshin when Genshin is still doing so well? Like like one of the excuses I've heard is that Mihoyo is not ending endgame content for the Chinese market for Genshin because the Chinese market has essentially capped out in terms of how much game time they can spend on gacha games because of this rule that underage people, like people below the age of 18, can only spend like 20 minutes a day playing video games and 3 hours in total for the entire week. But if they make other gacha games, then don't they have to like split their 20 minutes a day with other gacha games as well, so that they're still competing with Genshin Impact essentially? So what Genshin Impact, what Mihoyo really needs is a competitor that is not a Mihoyo game. And I think Blue Protocol might be that game because I'm looking at this image here, and obviously if you're a Genshin Impact player or just an anime fan in general, this probably looks very familiar to you. In terms of its overall aesthetic, it looks very similar to Genshin or just any like very polished anime-esque JRPG type of game. It actually looks like, what if Genshin Impact was the art style that Monster Hunter went with? And I actually really like this, but I do still have some concerns about this, and I'm still not going to call this like I don't think I will ever call anything a Genshin killer, but this is probably the closest one I've seen yet. But even now, I'm already seeing some problems pop up. For example, one thing that I don't really like about the presentation here is that this is just the Japanese account. Why is there no English Blue Protocol account? And this is one thing that I think is contributing to Genshin Impact's still very popular like existence, which is that they do a lot. They actually do so much in terms of marketing to make it palatable to non-Chinese audiences. They have an English account, a Japanese account, a Korean account, to market the game to other player bases. And I think even in the most recent live stream for 3.2, they finally got Japan their own live stream with their own voice actors. I suspect that they didn't do this at first in the past because Japanese voice actors are, I suspect, much more expensive than voice actors in the other regions, because Japanese voice actors, it's like their own entire world. They have their own fan bases and they have their own like that. It's basically its own entire world, and they're basically treated as idols essentially, to an extent that is not the same in North America and in China. And yeah, that's why I don't think they did this in the past. But now, for whatever reason, maybe they're making more money, so they have more resources to put into Genshin now and its marketing. So that's just some of the things they do to make it more palatable to other audiences. But when I'm looking at Blue Protocol, they definitely don't have as much money to put into the marketing for this game as Genshin Impact. And yeah, it shows because there's no other accounts. There's no English account. There's no Chinese account. I don't think there's a Korean account. Like, for the English audience, you're basically left with Translate Tweet as your official resource of information for Blue Protocol. And it's likely that you probably don't even know what it is if you don't follow MMOs, or if you don't follow gacha games, or you don't follow like JRPGs. If that's not your thing, then you probably don't even know that this game exists. Like, Blue Protocol database, what is this? It only has 4,000 followers. And this is, I assume, the most like accessible English source of information for Blue Protocol on Twitter. It just seems like some companies other than Mihoyo don't really treat the overseas player base as seriously. And it's not just Chinese games that are better. Like I've seen some people say that this is something specific to Japanese game developers. They don't really care about the overseas player base. But I think this applies to some Chinese game developers as well. Like look at Tower Fantasy. We're only getting the newest patch for Tower Fantasy after China has already gotten it. So why is that? Why don't they do simultaneous releases? I don't know. Maybe they just don't care as much. Maybe the infrastructure is not in place. But I just can't get excited about these games, about Blue Protocol, about Tower Fantasy or Arknights as much as Genshin Impact when they don't even give us the same content at the same time. Like how are content creators supposed to make content for this game when it's already being solved? So I hope Blue Protocol doesn't make that same mistake. I hope that they give us the same content at the same time. I believe that's what Final Fantasy XIV does, and if Blue Protocol does turn out to be an MMO, then I hope that is the path they chose to go towards. So yeah, that's basically all my thoughts on the performance of patch 3.2 and Sumeru in general. I hope that given that Genshin Impact has stabilized so much that they try to do something more exciting with it in the next few patches. I guess they've already decided what they're going to do, but I hope that they do some more exciting things in Fontaine more so than Sumeru, because a lot of the things we're getting are practically the same as Inazuma. They did do some interesting things with the structure of the banners and with the Archon quest, but now I'm looking for more gameplay stuff. I'm still drinking that hopium. Still taking those hopium pills that maybe one day we will get more combat content. Maybe, and even if they don't give us more combat content, maybe give us some ladders for like the card game. Maybe give us some more updates for other modes. Like, if they're going to go all the way with these mini games, then why not just give us a fucking Pokemon game in Genshin, right? We can already train fucking fungi in the event. Why not just give us an entire Pokemon-esque mode? Like, just give us the ability to train all the animals. Like Rishbull and Tiger, I want one of those things in my teapot. Let it battle other players, Rishbull and Tigers, or whatever monsters that they can capture in the overworld. Like, why can't we train like a mini Agedaha and then, get it to evolve into like Empoleon or whatever it is? Like, that Pokemon that can transform into other types of like elemental Pokemon. Give us that, except for Agedaha. So there are a lot of things they can do with Genshin Impact. It just remains to be seen whether or not, Mihoyo actually does it. Yeah, so I hope everything turns out for Blue Protocol. I hope that it turns into a legitimate competitor to Genshin Impact. If not in gacha games, then at least in aesthetic and in the same type of audience that Genshin Impact pulls. And I hope that Mihoyo does more exciting things with Genshin Impact in the future. So anyways, this is Bench Gamer signing out.